Good afternoon and welcome. Today is Wednesday, April 13th, 2022. A very happy birthday to my older son, Chip, and all of those who are celebrating their birthdays today. My name is Ward Keever. I am the founder and CEO of Covenant Wealth Strategies, a fee-based financial planning and wealth management firm located here in Wilmington, Delaware, and with clients across the country. And I'm joined today by Michelle Fisher, who is our Director of Strategic Communications and HR, as well as being a member of our leadership team. We are excited today to host this latest installment of our Stone Barn Speaker Series, which continues to be virtual, at least for the time being. Today we will be discussing how to protect your data and yourself and other matters pertaining to cybersecurity. Our presenter today is Jennifer Dahill. Jennifer is a director with MFS, which is a mutual fund company. Jennifer has been with MFS for 36 years. Interestingly, Jennifer has two sisters, and I know all three of the sisters, and all three of the sisters work in the financial services industry, but for different firms. In addition to her two sisters, Jennifer is the proud mom of two sons, one in Manhattan and one in Boston, so she is officially an empty nester. She herself lives in North Baltimore County. She grew up playing the flute, which is one of those things that's not on her bio, but Michelle here also plays flute and saxophone, so of course they struck up a conversation about that. And because I love the Chesapeake Bay, we've spoken about our shared love for the Chesapeake Bay and boating on the Chesapeake Bay, although it should be noted that Jennifer does sailboating. And of course, for those people who are on stink pots, I mean power boats, blow boats, I mean sailboats, there's a little bit of tension, let's just say that, in the boating community. But having said that, we have a shared love and a shared affinity for boating on the Chesapeake Bay. Jessica sails 35-foot J105s. Did I get that right, Jessica?
You did. Absolutely.
Okay, good. I admit to not knowing a lot about sailboats, so I'm thinking a J105, so a 35-foot sailboat. And so we are delighted to have Jennifer with us this afternoon to present on this topic. So it's interesting, this topic of cybersecurity. This was an issue far before Russia invaded Ukraine, but it's very interesting, since the invasion of Ukraine, there has been a whole lot more visibility of cybersecurity and matters pertaining to cybersecurity. So we think that this presentation is very timely, and we're pleased to bring it to you. So without further ado, Jennifer, I will turn it over to you, and we look forward to your presentation. Michelle and I are going to go on mute and go dark from a video standpoint, but we'll be here. And then when you are ready, we'll come back in and we'll host a Q&A session. So Jennifer, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Ward and Michelle, thank you so much for the opportunity to be in front of your clients. I'm going to preface this all by telling you that this is not meant to scare and or panic any of you in the audience. This is merely an effort to make sure that you are vigilant as it relates to your data. At the end of the day, scammers are after your finances. It all goes back to money. And we want to make sure that since this is a component of your financial health, that you all are comfortable, whether it's using your laptops, your iPads, your phones, whatever form of technology you use. And then in addition to that, whether it's the mail or your phone getting scam phone calls, we want to make sure that it all comes under the heading of your finances. A lot of people say, Jen, why are you doing this presentation when you work for an asset manager? Well, again, at the end of the day, this is going to protect your overall financial health. Ward mentioned that I've been doing this for 36 years, and I have never, ever been asked to do a client topic like this one as frequently as I have in the last 6 months. Part of it is because of the invasion of Ukraine. And for any of you that follow, whatever your media of choice might be, you'll notice that there's a large discussion out there talking about Russia and their efforts in scamming pretty much everyone within the United States. And most recently, they're saying that they're going to bump into the elections again in November. But that's really why it's become so much more relevant in the last couple of months. But I would submit to you in the past couple of years, COVID has also played a huge role in this conversation because so many people are at home, whether they're working at home full time, or whether their roles have changed as to what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. We're looking at technology much more than we ever used to. So one of the biggest things that I want to get across is just the volume of scams out there. And again, not meant to scare you, but to motivate you to be vigilant. So this asks the question, are you already a victim? And these numbers are staggering, and they go back from 2014 through 2021. Just in 2021 alone, we were up 8.4% as far as scammers go, which is pretty significant. In just 1 year, up 8.4% of actual scams. So some of these numbers, again, they may seem staggering, but you look at Yahoo, this goes back to 2014, 3 billion account holders were hacked. Facebook in 2017 had 533 million. If you were a Marriott rewards member, that was 500 million. I'm sure many of you remember the Equifax, and that was 148 million. So again, the messaging here is that the numbers are staggering, and what you need to be aware of is when they say they've been hacked or they've got your information, it's typically a combination of your Social Security number, your health insurance. It might even be other people that are related to you because you may have those on your accounts. So it's very, very important that we remain focused on what not to put out there in the big web. The one thing that we will tell you is that threats are by generation. And I understand that this is somewhat of an older population that I'm presenting to, and I would put myself in that category. I would say to you, if you have children, grandchildren, be aware of some of the threats that they're in front of on a day-to-day basis. When we first came out with this presentation, kind of in the midst of COVID, it fascinated to see, what my parents were experiencing as far as a threat, or what my children were experiencing. And anything that attacks them can ultimately have an effect on our financial health. So this may be something you want to pass along to somebody else in your family. Generation Z, so we're looking at those kids in the 15 to 18, 20-year-olds. Some of the threats that they see, believe it or not, are SAT preparation classes. And the reason behind that is right when you hit about sophomore year in high school, they get inundated with a free class subscription to do SAT prep. So I would pass on to that generation. That's a great place to get information. And kids aren't necessarily as mindful as to what they're putting out there. So be very cautious about any prep classes. And then the other thing are college scholarships. Your junior and senior year, children get inundated with different type of scholarship. If you fill out this application, if you go online and sign up for this, you might get a special college scholarship. I would say don't do it unless it's through the school that they attend. Next generation, and this is where I have two young men, millennials, both job offers and apartment hunting. So job offers right now are through the roof. posting false jobs so that they can get the information. And when you apply for a job, if you think about it, you're putting in your social security number, your address, your emails, you're giving them all your information. So it's really, really important that when they're posting or looking for a job, that age bracket is doing their due diligence, that it is in fact a legitimate job. And it all goes to the address of what they're looking up, which I'll get into in a minute. And then the other thing is apartment hunting. And I always use myself as an example. My youngest son just graduated from college a year ago. And in order for him to get an apartment in downtown Manhattan, it was a huge challenge because in addition to asking for his finances, even though he had a job with a decent income, they also in Manhattan and Boston, some places ask for the parents' financial documents just to make sure that these kids are legitimate. But my point to this is that this may be an opportunity where you, or maybe you have grandchildren that are getting out of college right now and looking at apartments. Be vigilant on that front because they get all the information and you just never know where that's going. Check the address, check the website before you give out any information. Generation X, this is where debt relief is a biggie. You see constant opportunities to reduce debt. I call this the crazy generation because we're kind of doing it all. We're raising kids, we're working full time, and we may have debt, and you get consistently, I'd say almost harassed for debt relief. And that can be in the form of digital, or it can also be in the form of the mail. And then military, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but this is phone scamming, where they're calling military families and actually telling them that their son or daughter needs money immediately. And everyone seems to fall for this. And then finally, when you look at this by generation, for anyone that is 60 plus, the easiest scam is through Social Security. And I'll show you how and why you need to be real careful on that note. But one of the things you'll see in the mail constantly is increasing your benefits. And just real simple, it's ssa.gov. If there's no .gov under that, it's not legitimate. And I'll spend some time talking about that. And then again, on the phone, it's claiming to be a relative. And I'll tell you what my general rule of thumb is as it relates to anything on your phone. So the way we're going to break this down, and I'm just going to take one time out right now and say, this brochure is my entire presentation. So I'm originally from Boston. I speak at 90 miles a minute. So if I'm going too fast, or you want to copy down some of the websites I mentioned, know that you can get this entire presentation with all the resources. And that's something that Michelle and Ward can give you the hard copy to, or they can email it to you. So to get back on what you need to know, we're going to talk about the threats. They're direct, they're digital, and hybrid means it's a combination of both. Some of the prevention tips and ways that you can fight back, or what I would say, protect yourself, and then the actions that you need to take if in the event a scam does occur, or you recognize credit card theft, anything along those lines, what to do in the event of. So direct attacks, we're going to break this down into 3 areas. Believe it or not, your wallet, the mail, and your phone. And I'm going to go through a couple scenarios as to how I've been hacked and scammed, and repeatedly get hacked and scammed. I'm on the road 24/7, so that could have something to do with it. But knowing what they can get to is part of the problem, and nipping it in the bud the minute you discover it, which is easy, believe it or not, is the key to success. So whether it's by your wallet, by the mail, or over the phone. So the mail. And I'm going to submit to you another reason why protecting your data, this topic has become so big in the last 2 years. Because of COVID, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this. We have seen a dramatic increase in theft through the mail. So in my neighborhood, which is in the middle of nowhere, for the last 30 years, I put my little red flag up and still put bills in there because I'm old school. And I also send checks to nieces and nephews and occasionally throw cash in there. Well, we subsequently found out within our neighborhood that anytime a flag was up, they were getting stolen. So they can't do much with the checks, but that $1 or $5 bill that you're in there, I literally have had this going on for 2 years since COVID started. So be very mindful. I have had my postman actually tell me, don't put the flag up. That's old school. You don't need to do that. We'll find the letter when we put your mail in. So just a little bit of a Jen tip. Ways to protect yourself from junk mail. And I'm going to be real obvious and transparent about this. I have done all three of these exercises that you see on the screen. And I still get a pretty good volume of junk mail. And because I get so little mail, I typically go through it all. I even save some of them that I know are scams so that I can use them at in-person seminars to show people. So you can do three things. You can opt out, prescreen.com. You can either call that number or you can go online and opt out. Another one is dmachoice.org. And then one that really has nothing to do with, I'd say, junk mail, because I love getting catalogs, who doesn't? But it's catalogchoice.org. And you can actually go through and delete what you're getting on a day-to-day basis. So if you're a recyclable nut like myself, you might want to go to catalogchoice.org. Protection from U.S. postal mail scams. Believe it or not, this is what's really blown up during COVID. Because we're all home, because we're all getting the mail on a day-to-day basis, we've seen more and more scams. And they typically revolve around reducing debt, Social Security. There are a lot of services that we see coming through. Whether it's, window treatments, you might get something for roofing. I personally am of the mindset, don't ever go through the mail to get some help on your home, to get anything to do with your finances. It should not be done through something you've received in the mail. So I look through this stuff more as a way to monitor and find out what scams are, but you rip them up. The point to that is any of the credit card informations, where you get an envelope that says you've been approved for $100,000 and it's American Express or it's Citibank, etc. You want to make sure, and I know I might be sounding so, basic with this, that those are ripped up in shreds because your information is on there. People can even take that out of the mailbox, and all of your information when you open it up, your name, your address, etc., is on there. So be mindful of those. And then the last thing are digital threats. Phone calls and voice messages. And this is a Jen Dahill rule, but in addition to putting on donotcall.gov, signing up with my number, I also have a cardinal rule where if I don't know a phone number, I will not answer the phone. Only because I have been sucked into conversations with people. I'm super polite and I don't know how to get them off the phone. But what I mean by this is even signing up for donotcall.gov, you're still going to get, whether it's via text or through an 800 number, you are still going to get calls. And I'd say at least 4 or 5 times a day, I still get them. It's especially hard for people like me that have, over hundreds of clients. But anybody that's important, they will leave a message. One of the things that pops up when I go through this, especially for the elderly, is that they need to block those calls once they've gotten them. So if you know that an 800 number, you listen to the message, and that's no one you ever want to talk to again, by blocking that call, they can't call you again. And I mention the elderly because, even myself, it's taken a lot of time to get a grasp on using an iPhone and how to keep people out of my phone. And I don't mean to throw this on Ward and Michelle, but there are ways to be very smart, meaning have all your contacts, make sure they're all labeled, and anyone else that calls you, don't pick up the phone. If it's important, they'll leave a message. Then when you check that message, immediately block it if it's no one you want to hear from. And they are so tricky with this. They can do 302 and then do 656, and you recognize that exchange as being maybe, Greenville or something like that. If there's no name that comes up, do not answer it. They have come up with so many ways to get you on the phone. And I hear this constantly, oh, I would never fall for something that came over the phone. And time again, we hear just terrible stories, especially with the elderly. They've got some relative's name and they're begging for money. So be very careful. Your wallet. What's in your wallet? I'm stealing the Jennifer Garner, I think it's Jennifer Garner's ad for Visa. This, again, I use myself as an example. I have minimized everything in my wallet to the point that I look through it before I walk out the door. And I've minimized it to the credit card that I know I might need, my debit card, my license. If I'm going to a doctor, I put my health insurance card in there. And I take everything else out, especially for the elderly. My mom is 83 and she has a wallet that's the size of a briefcase. And she loses it. And thankfully it's been found every time, but she has her life in her wallet. And I am repeatedly telling her, you have to get in the habit, even if it's getting a small size wallet. When you leave the house, be mindful of what you're carrying. If you have a Social Security card, it should not be in your wallet. It absolutely should be in a specific Social Security file and should not be on your person when you're going out. Health insurance cards, obviously, if you're older, you're going to be out there much more, out there going to see doctors. But, if you can train yourself to check your wallet every day, a lot of information can come from a health insurance card. If you're still employed, your employer's name is on there. So just think about that one card or a bank deposit slip, receipts, memberships. Most people no longer carry membership cards because everything can be downloaded to an app on your phone. And again, I don't want to put poor Ward or Michelle under pressure here, but I have gone so far as to say to some of my clients, give me your wallet, I'm going to go through it, and if it's something I don't think you need, I'm getting rid of it. Put it in the top drawer in your kitchen. But we carry around so many things that can threaten us and really hurt our financial health. I went through these, but no junk mail. The other thing I would say about junk mail is any of you that get what looks to be handwritten information, but you don't see a return address on it, that's another way to get people sucked into opening it up and going through it. Again, once you open that up, nothing you're not familiar with the organization, it's ripped up, shredded, what have you. These three particular websites, again, they are in the brochure, but there are 3 ways to minimize junk mail. We talked about mail scams, and I showed that little red flag because I wouldn't be worried about your mailman finding something that you're putting in your mailbox. He'll get it, but it's also, no pun intended, a red flag to thieves. And trust me, they're doing it, and they're doing it everywhere. Another thing you can do, and I mentioned I do this seminar a lot, and I am amazed at the number of people, specifically elderly, that now have signed up for what's called, if you see in the left-hand side, informeddelivery.usps.com. And basically what that is, you can look at your mail every day and you can get an idea of what's coming in. And I'm finding more and more people have signed up for this, and it gives you a good sense of what's going to be in your mailbox and if it's junk or not. So that once you get it, you can literally rip it right up right then and there. So again, if you want to see on a day-to-day basis what's coming, shockingly, USPS has done that for us. Common phone scams. You'll see a list here. The one that I personally get the most is down at the bottom, and it's always something that, believe it or not, I deliver this presentation day in and day out, but I always get tripped up on prize and lottery scams or Target or Amazon, and it looks so real to me, and it might be a text message or it's somebody calling. And again, they're a scammer trying to get your information. But that happens a lot via text for me. I don't know, maybe not everyone is proficient in the texting world. If you're not, it's probably going to be by phone. I go back to my first rule. If you don't know the number, don't answer the phone. If it's super important, you will be able to call that person back. Another thing we see a ton of are imposter scams. Somebody posing to be a family member. And one thing, unfortunately, that's popped up not only because of COVID, but also because of Ukraine and Russia invading Ukraine, are charity scams. And, you know, there are a couple ways, and this is in my brochure, where you can actually do a background check on the charity. But for any of you that are on Facebook right now or Instagram, you know, anything you read is about supporting Ukraine, and there's so many wonderful organizations, but there's a ton of GoFundMes. There are a ton of organizations I've never even heard of. So I always say go back to the basics before you donate to any charity. Make sure that you've done the research on that charity. You know, in the last 2 years, it's been amazing COVID schemes, which is so sad to me that people would do that. And then the other thing right now is Ukraine. So be mindful of what you're donating to. And there's several other things on here, the free trials, extended car warranties. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Don't try it. Protection from phone from spam calls. And the only reason I bring this back up is donotcall.gov is effective, but make no mistake, you're still going to get spam calls. You know, and sometimes it will pop up as spam on your phone. Again, don't answer that. This says use common sense and initiate the interaction yourself. Means if it's somebody that you've called and they're calling you back, that's fine. But general rule of thumb, don't know the number, don't pick up the phone. So some of the biggest compromised websites, obviously I would assume that you do have protection from specific, whether it's a VPN in your home, whatever cybersecurity method you have downloaded to your particular website, to your particular laptop. I'm going to hope that that's one thing that is a no-brainer and you do have that. These are two particular websites that we recommend at MFS, virustotal.com and then islegitsite.com. And those are two that give you some protection, but again, you want to have that backup in your home. Some people, once they retire, do go in and have a VPN secured to their particular laptops. Next slide. So I mentioned Wi-Fi attacks, and I'm not too sure how many of you are, really mindful of every time you walk into the airport, Target, you'll see a mall here. But over and over again, when you walk in, you will get that automatic question of, would you like to join the Wi-Fi? And again, this is just a Jen Dahill MFS rule, but I would recommend that absolutely 100% you don't do that. I've been sitting in Starbucks where other people have logged on to my own Wi-Fi. So just be mindful again, even if you check into a hotel. I mean, if you're there for an extended period of time, that's completely acceptable. But you just have to be very, very aware of who's logging in that might be using your data. Next slide. So this is something that I mentioned that all of us fall for, myself in particular. But it's always, you're winning a prize. You're always getting this wonderful opportunity. And it always seems legitimate because it seems to come from, the targets. This says Google. Congratulations, you won a $1,000 Google Play gift card. And when you go to those websites, you immediately get questions. And all they're trying to do is access your information. So going back to blocking calls, you can also block them if they come through in a text message format. And it's a habit that you will thank me for long term. But the minute you get that text, just automatically, if you know it's junk or it's some sort of text scam, block the call. The other thing that's the most popular with the elderly, and I've mentioned this a couple times, but it's something that's near and dear to my heart because I've had this happen to two relatives. But this middle one, it says, "Hey, it's John. Got a new phone. I hate to bother you, but I'm out of town. Just got into a car accident. I'm okay, but I'm at the hospital and I need $200. And there's all different types of scenarios where they could have just enough information about you to know that you have that nephew, that brother or nephew named John, that'll get you in that crisis mode and immediately send money. So just don't do it. You don't know them, don't do it. And then the other thing that I also see a lot of, we've detected fraudulent activity. And those typically show up on your phone in a text message, and they are never, ever real fraud activity. If you have fraud activity, especially on credit cards, you're going to get an immediate phone call. Some of your banking, like myself, we have that automatically tied into an alert, and you know it's from your bank. But just be mindful again of what's coming through on text. Next slide, please. I mentioned COVID has been a real biggie, and it's partly because they're asking for so much information online. Someone can come in contact with you that was positive. And I don't know if any of you remember this, but at the beginning of the pandemic, we were getting constantly bombarded with text messages as to doing tracing, contact tracing, and we were filling out information on our phones. And I would just say cease and desist if it's something COVID related, if it's a questionnaire on your phone. And the other thing is applying for vaccines. I would say do everything through your doctor. It depends upon the state that you live in. Some states like Maryland and Delaware will actually send you notification if you're up for a booster, meaning it's time to get another booster. But again, I would not go through these. I would simply delete that text, pick up the phone, and call your doctor. Next slide, please. Next slide. So a couple of prevention tips, and this is going to sound like a no-brainer, but I want to show you how easy it is to crack a password. Next slide, please. I'm not trying to overwhelm you, but I'm going to focus in on the purple in this particular slide. And you'll see it says, time it takes a hacker to brute force your password. You know, I personally always think I have the most creative passwords. I have to have them all written out, otherwise I will forget them. But it'll show you the number of characters, which the standard today is to have 8 to 12 characters. You don't ever want to have just numbers, and then lowercase letters, and you'll see as you go along to the right, uppercase and lowercase. And then if you look to the far right, this is where you want to be. You need to have numbers, upper and lowercase letters, and symbols. And I'm going to say go all the way down to the green area. And that's when you can rest assured. I'm not suggesting that you need to have, if you look at number 13, it gives you an idea of the number of characters, the lowercase letters, uppercase letters, and it shows you 2 years. You know, no one would spend that much time trying to hack it. But the messaging is the more you have, yes, it's harder to remember, but somewhere in your desk and some top secret place, you keep all your passwords and update them. Some people have them on their phone. I have not gotten to that point because I'm afraid I'm going to lose my phone. But what your password is should not be uniform. It should be creative, and it needs to have the most that you could put in there, meaning uppercase, lowercase, at least 8 different numbers or letters. Next slide. Backing up information and updating software. This is a question I get a lot, especially if you have an iPhone or you're part of the cloud. You know, some people will say, well, how often do you download that and how often do you back it up? You should typically do it on a weekly basis. Some phones, when you turn them off, will automatically do that for you, but it's just really critical that you're constantly backing that up. Next slide. Now this is where I would assume that Ward, whoops, one more, go back to, where are we? One more, yeah, reviewing and monitoring financial statements. So if you have not gone to paperless statements, I would encourage you to do so, because whether it's your, you know, statement from LPL or different asset managers or your banking statements, everything is in there. And from the time it leaves that company to going into the mailbox to in your hands to in the trash, there are countless spots where that information can get stolen. So a general rule of thumb is if you can get everything online, fantastic. The other thing is, obviously, from your financial health perspective, know that Ward's getting all these statements as well. But it's really not necessary in 2022 to be getting bank statements. I mean, everything can be done with an app, either on your phone or online. It may take some training and you may be old school, but getting rid of those statements reduces the risk of having things stolen. Next slide. Credit bureaus and credit reports. This is actually another great presentation that we give, all preventing credit rankings and ratings and making sure that your credit is immaculate. But what's really important is checking your credit score can sometimes show you something that's incorrect. 3 times over the past 30 years, I have had mistakes on my credit score that had absolutely nothing to do with me, but somebody with a similar last name. And the only way I caught it was by going through my credit score. MFS recommends that you check your credit score on a day-to-day basis. I think that's a bit extreme, but there are 3 different websites on the left hand of this screen, and whether it's Equifax, Experian, or TransUnion, you can check pretty much on a monthly basis. But a lot of times, if anything has been stolen and you were unaware of it, or, I had one that said I had a lien on something, which was not true. It's a great kind of red flag if there's a mistake in there to know that something else has been compromised. So, if you want to get an app on your phone, all of these different places provide it, and most of your credit cards have free credit scores tied right into their companies. So, for example, I have only two credit cards, and I get my credit score on a day-to-day basis. If there's some fluctuation in it, I'm going to go in and check what happened, and that's where you can sometimes find the errors. Next slide, please. Web activity, this is kind of a no-brainer, but just be mindful of what you're doing on the web. Anything that you're checking, especially when it's on your phone. If any of you that are on Facebook or Instagram, you will know that there's an algorithm where you could be looking up shoes at a particular department store, and then you'll notice that you're getting advertisements for shoes left and right. Everything you do is leaving an imprint. So just be mindful of what you're doing on the web. Next slide. Another thing that we're seeing a lot of, again, because people are home much more, are scam questionnaires and quizzes. And, I'll admit to you that a couple years ago, I completely got involved into one of these because it was actually all about data threats. And I thought, oh, I'm going to fill this out and I'm going to have one layer of protection. But when people start asking you questions like, what's your mother's maiden name? What street did you grow up on? Unless it's for your primary credit card and it's some questionnaire or quiz, do not fill it out. The place that I see this the most is on social media. So again, if you're on Facebook, somebody will invariably post something that says, take this test to see if you're this personality or that personality. Do not do it. It's a great way to get information out of you. Next slide. One more social media scam, and again, this will come through on, pretty much all of your social media sites. Don't fall for it. Don't give to it. Make sure you're checking that particular address, meaning the email address. Next slide. Always initiate the interaction. This ties into, if it's something that you initiated, obviously you will pick up the phone. You will look at that text message. But if it's something that you never initiated, an inquiry somewhere, do not respond. It's as simple as that. If it's important enough, they will find you some other way. And then the next slide, please. Some of the actions to take if you find out you have been scammed. And thankfully, as easy as it is to get scammed, the protections that are in place, the good news to this whole scenario is that if your credit card is used, your wallet gets stolen, it's pretty easy right now to shut everything down in a matter of minutes. And thankfully, a lot of credit cards, you are not responsible for what's put on there. Next slide, please. So this goes through and kind of highlights what to do if you paid with. And then on the right-hand side, what do you do if they've obtained sensitive information? And you'll see that it says act fast. I mentioned credit card theft. There's also a thing called skimming in 2022. As an example, a few weeks ago, I was out in Frederick, Maryland, and, used my credit card at a gas tank, and the next day they were buying things in Monaco. I'm not kidding you. So you can get a lot of skimming. And the general rule of thumb here is then instead of using swipes, you actually use the little circle on the top of your credit card. That is much harder to get into, but be mindful of where you're using those credit cards. And it just goes through a couple other things that are obvious. You know, if you lose the last thing on here, if you lose a gift card or a prepaid card or a cash reload card, they're gone. There's really no way to get those back. I'm going to go through this at the end, but this talks about what to do if they have obtained all your information. And I'm going to give you a couple websites at the end to show you. Next slide, please. So,
And Jennifer, just to manage your time, we have about 5 minutes remaining.
thank you very much, Ward. So just to kind of review, and again, my apologies for the technical glitch here. It hasn't happened yet like this, so my apologies. But some of the types of threats and attacks, obviously, we've gone through digital, we've gone through direct attacks, and then hybrid being a combination of both. Ways to fight back, whether it's a strong password, backing up your data, switching to paperless statements, you know, being very mindful of what you're doing day to day on your computers and on your phones, learning to kind of what I say, block and tackle. And that means blocking people you don't know, whether it's a text or whether it's an email. And then the actions to take if scammed. When you get this actual brochure, Protecting Your Data, there are several resources on here about what to do. Personally, again, I'm going to offer up Ward and Michelle that the first thing you want to do is call them just to make sure, you know, that it may just be a credit card situation, but if it's anything deeper or bigger, you want to make sure they're privy to it. So I would just submit to all of you that I do not mean to make this a negative presentation, and I am trying to scare you only from the standpoint that your overall financial health is very much dictated with how you monitor your technology and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis with your information. Who are you giving it to? How are you giving it to? There are several things on here that I mentioned will be in your brochure. I'm not going to go through every single website, but I will say in that right-hand corner where it says, if you're a victim, there are 3 different places. And the common theme that you see on here, it's all .gov, .gov. Kind of like when you go to Social Security, you only go to ssa.gov. It shouldn't be a .com, .org, nothing, just .gov. So with that, I will try to open it up for questions that anybody may have. And if you, there we go. I know Michelle has her iPad out and ready to go. And if there are any specific questions or you need to look at another slide, by all means, please do so. I want to thank you very much for your time today. And hopefully we will do another one with just immaculate reception on Jen's part down in Glenarm, Maryland. There must be something in the woods today. I don't know.
Well, Jennifer, we appreciate your presentation, and we hope that your technology situation gets squared away, but we also find it interesting, unique, perhaps somewhat humorous that in the middle of a presentation about technology and cyber issues and that sort of thing, that we would have a little issue go live. So we appreciate you giving the presentation for us today. We actually did have a couple of questions that have already come in prior to our presentation today. So one of the questions was, using social media, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or that sort of thing, what are some ways that I even know, how could I know that I've been hacked on those presentations or on those platforms? And let me just also remind, if you have a question, please email Michelle at covenantwealthstrategies.com, and we'll try to get that to Jennifer. If we can't get it to her during our presentation right now, we'll circle back to you one-on-one. So Jennifer?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Ward, and I get this a lot, but the easiest place to get hacked right now is on Facebook. And what I would recommend is if you are on Facebook, go into the settings and see what type of information do you have up there. I actually went back in and took my address off, my phone number off, my birthday off, because people can put all that together to kind of get a profile of you. If you have been hacked on Facebook, you will know immediately because people will start to get friend requests from you. And you've probably experienced that where you get a friend request from someone that you already know you're friends with. So that's typically the biggest giveaway. And when you've been hacked on Facebook, any information that you had out there is what the scammers are getting. So birthdays, addresses, get them off.
How frequently should I change my password? And I know that another question that had come in is possible suggestions for password managers or applications, and I saw that on one of your previous slides. So I'll just say that for people who, again, would like a copy of that brochure, I think we're going to be sending out a copy of this to everybody who's a participant today. But if you'd like multiple copies or know someone else who would like a copy, please let us know. But Jessica, how frequently should we change our passwords and suggestions for password managers?
So the good thing about 2022 is you will be directed to change your password. Meaning if it's every different company has a different length of time before they'll contact you and say, you know, your password needs to be changed. I personally, at MFS, we get asked once a month to change our password. I do not think you need to do that. I would probably go on an annual basis in changing your passwords. You know, the problem that I think a lot of us experience is that there are so many different things that require passwords, it can get somewhat overwhelming. So, you will be triggered by that particular company or credit card to change it, which is great. They're watching out for us.
Yeah. Another question that came in is if I have a VPN, virtual private network software, do I also need an antivirus? And I don't know that you would have, or an antivirus software. I don't know, Jennifer, that you would have the answer to that question. I'll share my answer while you're considering your answer. But a VPN, a virtual private network, is typically a dedicated way to dial in. So, for example, in this age of remote work, I might have a network at the office. I might have a desktop at the office. But if I'm not at the office, I might, quote, remote in through the use of a virtual private network. Having said that, I might be using that same computer for other things, personal or other activities that are not through the virtual private network. So having a antivirus software on my computer that I'm remoting from, and then quite frankly, also the computer that you're remoting into, that should also have a antivirus software. But if you're remoting in, it's typically going to be through work. So your work technology administrator should have that squared away. So I'm assuming that if you're using a VPN, you're remoting into a work network, that should be handled by your work technology administrator. But the computer that you are remoting in from, even though you're using a VPN to remote in, if you're using that computer for anything else, certainly you would want to have antivirus software. So Jennifer, that would be my answer to the question. Anything to add to that?
That was brilliant. The only thing I will say, based upon the age bracket of attendees, which I think is 60 plus, I don't mean to throw everybody in that category, but I've had several of my peers retire over the past couple of years. And we are so used to VPNing in virtual network like every day. And because of what's going on globally, they have all decided to get VPN networks on their home computers. So consider it like an extra layer of protection. So I actually would consider that right now, double protection.
Great. And we have one more question, and then we'll wrap questions, and I'll do final comments. So if my credit report is frozen, meaning I froze my credit due to a breach at work or a breach, quite frankly, at Equifax, so I have put a freeze on my credit, can I still get my credit report from Equifax?
Wow, I've never had this question. That's a really good question. I would assume that the credit report is always there. I do not know the answer to that, but I can find out. Absolutely.
Okay, that'd be great. And how I would answer that question is, so the credit freeze basically prevents third parties, that is to say borrowers, from getting your credit report. And typically a borrower is not going to make an underwriting decision or a credit decision if they cannot get access to your credit report. So by putting a credit freeze on your the credit bureaus, that simply means that when any borrower, or more specifically when a lender says, hey, we want to check your credit to see whether or not you're credit worthy, they cannot get access to your credit report. But that's different than you as the individual getting access to your credit report. You should still be able to get access to your own credit report, even if you've put a freeze on. And in fact, if you are borrowing money, say you want to go buy a car and borrow, or you want to buy a house and apply for a mortgage, you as the individual would go into the app or the website to unfreeze or temporarily suspend the freeze on your credit report so that the lender can in fact then access your credit report in order to determine the credit worthiness and extend credit. Sometimes, and I've got freezes on my own, and every once in a while I will get a notification that such and such would like access or would like to get a copy of your credit report. And that's also an indication sometimes if somebody's made an application in your name fraudulently, and you can go back to the credit bureau and say, no, that was a fraudulent application, and they can then shut that down. So, but these are great questions. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. A couple of the thoughts that I would share. First of all, I thought the threats by generation, Jennifer, was great. I hadn't seen that before, but I think it's very true. There's a concept called know your client or target marketing. And so if they already know enough about you to know approximately what age you are, they're not necessarily going to be applying, reaching out to the boomer generation for scholarship offers. So, these crooks are smart, and so they go age by age. And I thought also it was interesting, Michelle and I were speaking while you were presenting on this topic about job offers. So of course, people who are, generally going to be millennials and graduating from college or early in the process, I said to Michelle, I'm like, that's brilliant if you're a crook, because how do you get people's information? They have to, and so that a crook might actually, quote unquote, hire somebody to get all of their information, and then it turns out there's no job, and now you've had your bank account swept out too, because you gave them the information for the direct deposit to your bank account. So that's just crazy. I would recommend that you buy a shredder, $50 to $100 on Amazon. Make sure it's a cross-cut or a diamond shred, not a strip shred. Don't answer the phone if you don't recognize the number. They can leave you a message. And I get lots of messages for car warranties, which I then just delete. But if it's a legitimate person leaving you a voicemail, then you can give them a call back. You can also update your contacts so that phone number next time it comes in is associated with a legitimate contact. Make a copy of everything in your wallet. We have yet to hear of a thief who steals somebody's wallet and then calls the number on the back of the credit card to report it lost or stolen. So what we recommend our clients do is make a copy of all the contents of your wallet once a year, front and back. Make the copy, put it up in your vault, in your My Documents folder in your vault. We do have a client whose husband's wallet was stolen, and she never reported it because the thief was spending less than her husband did. So I thought that was, a little yuck there at the end. So I did take Jennifer's advice, though. I had my wife, Debbie, go through my wallet to remove anything that she thought was unnecessary I got it back with no cash, no credit cards, and just a few wonderful pictures of my beautiful bride. So we'll wrap up with that. Thank you so much for joining us today. Jennifer, thank you for your time and for your presentation. For those who are in attendance listening, if you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Michelle or myself or any member of our team will do our best to answer your questions. And we look forward to having you at our next Stone Barn Speaker Series event.